Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Healthy Business Podcast. I am Sarah Cook and I'm super excited. I have a guest with me today. I have James Rodwell, who is an Olympic athlete, winning a silver medal in the Rio Olympics in 2016. He is England's most capped rugby sevens player with 93 World Series tournaments and did hold the record for the world's most capped rugby until recently. He's played in 3 Commonwealth Games, 3 World Cups for the sevens rugby. He's not just been an Olympian from a player perspective, but he's also coached at an Olympics, World Cup and Commonwealth Games. And he also does a lot of coaching support for Vitality as a performance champion. But potentially most importantly, he's also my younger brother. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. And I'm super excited to delve into lots of different areas. So thank you for joining me, James. Super excited.
No, thank you for having me. It's nice to finally get the call up.
I know, after well over 100 episodes, and I finally decided to invite you on. Well, you are super busy. I know you have lots of, until recently, you were kind of traveling a lot with your rugby and doing lots of different things. And I've been asking my audience kind of different things about what it means to, or what questions I should be asking you as an Olympic athlete, as a sports high performance athlete as well. And, you know, my listeners know that my background is in sport as well. And I think there's so many links between sport and business, and obviously this is much more of a kind of a business focused podcast, but I think it's really interesting to chat to people from different areas within the world as well as also industries, because I think we can learn a lot from different people and different things. So I'm really interested to hear your take on the question that I always ask my my guest experts and guest interviewees. So tell me what does a healthy business mean to you?
Yeah, obviously I don't own my own business or anything like that, but when I think of healthy business, I think around the environment that's created. And I suppose if I relate that back to what I created within my sporting environment, and then when I head coach with the women's sevens as well, the environment for me was massive, and create a healthy business, healthy environment for me is all built around the culture. I'm someone who likes or thinks that a healthy environment, a good environment, is all around having an empathetic culture, which gives people the opportunity to thrive, but also makes people care and want to help each other get better as well. So with that is also linked to having a really clear strategy and goals associated it, so everyone can buy into that and almost work together to try and achieve the same things, whether you're starting out your journey or whether you've been there as an experienced person. So it's all around, for me, around the people that you have around you that share the same passion with driving performance and getting the best out of people and results, really. So yeah, healthy business is all about that, all about people and environment.
I love that. And I think it's really important because, you know, whether you're working on your own as a business owner or whether you're part of a team and you're growing your business, or as you're part of a team outside of that environment that is created has such a knock-on effect on so many different things, right? So whether it is from, you know, a mindset perspective, whether it's your habits, as you say, it's the culture, what is important, it helps you kind of get intentional. Take me back to the early days from, you know, I know you started playing sport. We've both started playing sport at a really young age. And I think talking about culture, like, that's really hard to think about as a young sportsman, right? So how did that develop for you as you kind of progressed in your sporting career?
Yeah, I think when you're starting out in anything, it's all very raw and new. So you try and absorb as many things as you possibly can. And I think if we look at it from a sporting context, when you go into a new environment, you want to be a sponge almost. You want to take as much information off people as you can, but you're also looking and seeing how other people interact and react with each other. And I think my view on culture is very much framed from those experiences along the way and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And too often, I think within sport and business, that culture is sort of driven from the top, and you're expected to follow like suit with it, and you don't necessarily buy into it, especially as a younger person. So I think the more you can have people involved in those sort of decisions around creating the culture and the reasons behind it, then you're going to get a lot better buy-in from it. So I think for me, there's loads of times I can think back where values and culture and things were put up on the wall and not necessarily adhered to, or you're expected to follow them, or this is our strapline, this is our culture, this is what we buy into. And yeah, there is a part of that as a new person going into those environments that you have to sort of buy into a culture that is already created if you're new to it. But when you get the opportunity to sort of change or adapt those cultures to be more positive, I think that's where, as you get older and more experienced, you can have those effects. So I guess looking back to right at the beginning, it's almost a bit like a rabbit in the headlights. There's so much you're taking in, and I think that's with anything, right? If you're starting a new business or going into a new environment, there's just so many things you can take in. And it's just trying to absorb as much as possible, really, and then trying to pick out the bits that you think are really important and actually that will grow you as a person as well.
And how do you get over that overwhelm? Like, as you say, there's always so many things that are going on, whether you're looking internally and developing yourself, you're constantly learning, that sort of sponge mentality, which is so important. But how do you balance that with what often happens is this kind of fear almost that, are you doing it right? Are you doing it in the expected way? But also the shoulds versus the wants, and also, that kind of bigger piece around overwhelm.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. And I think it's all about the people you surround yourself with. So if you can get good people around you that you trust, not only will they give you the positive reinforcement that you're doing things right, but also when you're going slightly off track, they'll be able to pick you up as well and sort of help you understand why you need to change certain habits or behaviors. And I think that doesn't just relate to culture, that's with everything, right? With having people that you trust so much that they're not just going to give you yes answers all the time. Am I doing well? Yeah, of course you are. You're doing great. Well, actually, no, you could do better there. Like, it's those people you want that will actually give you honest answers. And they're probably slightly different to sort of just your friendship group. It's actually having the right people and almost like a circle of trust, I suppose. And I was talking to someone about this a little while ago that likened it to the players' box in tennis. So you're the one in the center of the court. You're doing everything you can to perform, but in that box you've got everyone that's around you: your family, your coach, your psychologist, your nutritionist, your strength conditioner, all the people that you've put into your box to make you the best version of yourself. And I thought that's a really good way of sort of seeing it and understanding it. And another way to look at it is almost like your virtual boardroom. Like, who would you have in your boardroom to like make sure that you're making good decisions moving forward? And ultimately there's always going to be someone out there with more experience than you. There's always going to be someone that could give you a different lens on something, to maybe give you a different perspective and change your way of thinking. And I think that's something that I've probably tried to go with as my career sort of progressed, is to almost, you're never the finished article. It doesn't matter how many tournaments you've played, how many business meetings you've been in, you can always be better. And as soon as you stop thinking that, then you might as well go and do something else, because you've sort of lost the love to learn.
Yeah, that's really valuable, isn't it? I think just we're all on a journey, and that journey will evolve and will change depending on who is around you. There's so many things that I want to kind of delve off from that, but I think talking about support is so valuable, especially, we're kind of linking this back to business a little bit. And a lot of people are solo business owners, and they get to that point where they want to scale and they want to grow, and they're like, well, I need a team to do this. But I think what's really important is that actually your team doesn't have to be people you employ. Like, if we look at it from a wider perspective of support, as you say, from your perspective, you had the strength conditioning and, your coaching and psychologists and things like that. But, me being on the outsides of that as well, like, I used to come and watch your matches, and we'd have those conversations from a sort of family perspective, a personal perspective. And I think that's also really important, that you recognize the support that you need, but also that can be within your working situation, but also outside of that as well. I mean, you've got a family, you've got 2 young children, and that has to balance as well, right? And I think how do you create that support if you're growing and you're learning constantly? Were there I mean, you were, as part of a team, you had sort of a natural part of the support there, but you probably, I'm guessing, navigated towards certain people within that team, or certain people that you felt like you could trust with, when you're having those wobble moments. How do you create that support? I'm going to call it network, that takes you to that next level, that allows you to be challenged in certain situations. I think that's a really valid point. It's not just people that are yes sayers to you, it's people who are going to challenge you and help you develop further. How do you recognize the type of people that you need as part of that support network?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said right at the beginning, just around when you're going into a new environment, just absorbing everything, and almost you're a pretty good judge of character yourself and who you want to be associated with. Now, that support network can change over time. I think that's really important. I think the biggest thing I learned was you've got to be really vulnerable and open yourself up if you want to get better. Mm-hmm. You've got to understand that you're going to make mistakes, but you don't mean to make mistakes, and that's applicable to everything, right? So if we use sort of clients you work with around like solo businesses, sole traders, individual people who don't necessarily have all those employees to bounce ideas off, how do they find a network that is not just going to give them yes answers? And it's just being vulnerable and saying, look, I know I don't know everything. I've got to try and seek something. Now, I might have a conversation with someone, think, actually, I met this person at this thing. They'll be a really good person to keep a check on. And it's something I suppose from my playing days, when I moved into coaching, I lent on people outside of rugby to try and help me understand how to manage people better. And they're people I've met through rugby, but I trust them to give me an honest answer that I can be completely open and vulnerable to say, I don't know the answer here. Now, are they going to judge me for that? No, because they're helping me. And if you get the right people that want to help, then you're going to be in a really good place. So I think it's just opening up, like, what areas am I missing? Like, what areas could I be better at? And who can I go and seek that I've met over the years that's doing it quite well in that space? And I think that's something, as I said, you've got to be vulnerable to do that, because I imagine as an individual business owner, it's a lonely place where you're expected to do everything. You've got to do everything, because if you don't, there's no one else to do it. So, and I felt a little bit like that at times when I was head coaching, that if I don't do something, it just won't get done. Now, is that the right thing for me to have felt? Of course it is, because ultimately all the decisions were stopping with me. So I needed to make sure that I'd sort of, one, had the right conversations with people around me, but two, if I needed information, I've got to go and find it. I can't just sit there and go, this isn't working. I've got to go, right, well, who is it that I can go and talk to because anyone who starts, they're not going to start the business without ever speaking to anyone about it first. So I think there's always people you can go and speak to. And I think since finishing with England and the coaching side with them, what I've realized is that the network's massive, and you've just got to reach out and speak to people. And it might not be them that are going to help you, but they'll probably know some people that might be able to help. So you just, as I said, got to be vulnerable and open yourself up to wanting to learn new things.
Yeah. And I think there's always, I always kind of liken it back to kind of growth mindset. And actually, there are going to be challenges and obstacles in whatever you're going to be doing, whether that's personal life, business life, sporting life. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be things that we don't know. But going through that sort of fear zone, getting over yourself almost, to then learn more, to reach out, to ask the right questions. I know for me, it's one of the reasons that I run my mastermind, and I have people in there create that safe space where people can ask those questions, not just from me, but also other people. But it's also why I'm in a mastermind, because I want to be in those different conversations. I want to be challenged and have that as well. And that's, for me, is where you grow. That's where you learn. And I think that's very similar from what you just said, especially when you're navigating those changes, like when you left being a player into moving into that coaching space. That's not an easy thing. Like, that's all you'd known for years, right? Was playing and being coached. And yes, asking those questions, but actually navigating that shift and being open to making those changes is really important, I think.
Yeah, I think you talking about growth mindset is obviously very applicable within a sporting environment where you're training a lot, but you're only performing a short amount of times throughout the season. And it's the ability to morph between and understand as you as an individual when the right time to be in growth mindset is and when the right time for performance mindset. And can you have both? Of course you can. It's just knowing what state you're in at that time. So if you're in the growth mindset, you've got to open yourself up to say, right, I'm going to make loads of mistakes here, but I'm going to learn from every one of them. Whereas the performance side of things, you're probably not going to push to those sort of complete limits on almost tipping at the tipping point where you're going, right, well, I know what I can do, and I'm going to do this at the very best I can do. And that for me is the performance mindset side of things. Then you go back to the drawing board, right? Did it work? Yes. How do we get even better at that? What do we need to practice? So very simple. I mean, you said at the beginning, there's so many things that transfer over from sport to business. And I think it's amazing how one of them's like outdoors throwing a ball around on the pitch to the sort of how they can be likened to straight away into that business setting. And you see all of the things that can just transfer over and help people really. But ultimately, all of this is just trying to get people to be the best version of themselves. And how do you navigate that? And as I said, if you think you're there, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah. And I think, do you know what? It's really interesting because you talk about like being the best version of yourself. And, you know, obviously you being an Olympian, and I'm super proud that you are. And you know, okay, I played lacrosse, and we've had these separate conversations about the comparisons between, you know, kind of a more of a niche sport and something that is much more on the kind of big stage. One of the things, though, that I think is really important around that performance mindset, as you call it, is the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, the stuff that goes on when people aren't watching. And, you know, we've both had various injuries, and that's a massive hit on mindset. And I want to talk to you about that, because I think the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, that's as you say, that's kind of almost the growth mindset. What do you do? How do you stay motivated? How do you take those knocks, that analysis piece? How do you utilize that to fuel that higher performance? Because that's the bit that I know that a lot of people do struggle, is that they feel like they need to be on all the time. They feel like they need to, you know, I'll use that sort of business example of kind of being on social media all the time and being constant. And I talk a lot about actually it's being consistent rather than being constant. And I think, yeah, I'd love to kind of delve into, you know, how do you keep that motivation? How do you keep that focus? How do you, whether it's routines, rituals, I don't know what that looks like, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about the behind the scenes stuff of when you're not on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, the behind the scenes stuff is the biggest part of everything, and you've reeled off a lot of different things there. And I think that can be quite overwhelming when you say it like that. Like, yeah, there's so many parts that make up the whole for performance. And like anything, goal setting, you have to break it down. You can't just go from A to Z without the stepping stones in between. You have to break everything down meticulously and be planned with it. So if we just take one part of that, you touched on analysis, and analysis in sport or business is huge. It's your chance to see if you've performed well or you need improvement in certain areas, your ability to reflect properly and not just go, yeah, that went well, that was all right. So in a sports side of things, we're obviously reviewing training, reviewing matches, previewing opposition, looking at how we can play, what styles work for us and all of that. So if I was just to say to you, watch this match and tell me something, you'd be able to do it. But would you then break it down even further to say, right, well, what tools have I got that will actually counteract that? How do we then practice it in training to make sure that when we see that picture in the game, we're feeling really confident that we can deliver? So there's so many layers even just to analysis that, you know, to actually give yourself a chance to perform. Like one of the things with analysis is that I liken it to things like exams or even to like battles in war. Like if you don't know what you're coming up against, you're never going to succeed. You might get lucky once in a while, but consistently you're not going to perform. Whereas if you put the effort in beforehand and you're really prepared and ready to go and you've practiced things and you feel confident, more than likely you're going to have a better chance of getting a successful outcome. Obviously, the other team wants to do well as well, so you can't guarantee it. But all you can do is put the right process in place to give yourself the best chance to perform. And I think with mindset, that's how I look at it. Like every small detail is important. It doesn't matter what it is. It's important. Now, if you get your planning and process done right, that gives you time to breathe. So for me, if keeping on the analysis trend, before games or before matches, I would have done the analysis before the weekend got there. And then I'm just refreshing at the weekend.
Yeah.
I'm not going into the game 10 minutes before going, right, I'm just going to watch this team for the first time. I'll just see if I can remember it all. That'd be crazy, right? You'd go in, so imagine going into a presentation for a new client, and someone gave you a slide deck that you'd never seen before and said, right, go and do the best you can do on that. And you'd be like, I have no idea what's coming next.
Yeah.
Like, as I said, you might get it once in a while where you come away happy, but most of the time you're going to be a bit frustrated. So I think it's just having a good plan in place, thinking about things beforehand, what's important and what's not. But the mindset is all around like, what's going to help me get better? And you touched on injuries as well. And I think injuries are obviously something that derail you.
It's the curveball, right?
Yeah. So you think you've got this great plan in place. You've got little steps. The goals are there. You've planned out your season. You've planned out your meetings or social media, whatever it is. And you go, right, but now I've just been derailed. Like, how do I deal with that? Like, initially there'll be an emotional response. You'll be frustrated, you'll be annoyed. Why is it me? Why is this happening to me? And then you go, well, actually, like, let's put this into perspective. I can navigate around this.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, so if I look back to my biggest injuries before Rio, and when I dislocated my kneecap, and I thought that was it, that was my Olympics over. There was no chance that I was going to be back in 4 months to be able to play in the Olympics. And not only that, then compete with the rest of Team GB to like try and get into that selection as well.
Yeah.
So for 36 hours, 48 hours, I was emotional wreck, and I was like, that's gone, it's gone, until I sort of slowly put the pieces together and understood what happened to my knee. Speak to the specialist, find out the plan, how I can get back, what the options are, what the rehab looks like, and then it's just about being really diligent with what you're doing. So if you set a goal in anything, the chance of you going in a straight line from there to there is zero. Like, it's never
just doesn't happen, does it?
It's like the wiggliest line you'll ever see. So, but that's exciting, right? Because actually, you might get closer to your goal, going, well, I can push this a little bit further now because things have gone really well. The steps have been really good, and it's all working better than I thought it was. So let's push the goal a little bit more. On the flip of that, things might have gone really badly, and you might have to adjust the goal slightly, going, well, this is what I really wanted to achieve, but actually the growth there is still massive, so that's all right. So I think it's understanding that it's not a straight line to success. You have to find little angles to be better and keep improving, and understand that those curveballs are going to come at some point, and be ready to say, look, I mean, I use perspective as a huge tool for overcoming adversity. And, if you look at it from a sporting point of view, you go, right, I'm injured, I'm missing this tournament. All right, well, it's rugby at the end of the day. I mean, I'm gutted that I'm missing it, but I know that I'll do my rehab and I'll get to come back and I'll be stronger than I was before. So, like, perspective is huge, right? And
yeah, the reframe is so powerful.
It's massive, because if you flip it to a business point of view, you might be going up, say we were going up against each other to try and get a client. We both want that client. Someone's got to win and someone's got to lose. Now, if I put everything into it and you win, and then I go, well, I'm rubbish, there's no point, I'm never going to do this again. Well, it's like, well, no, hold on a minute. Let's take a step back, put it into perspective. There's a 2-horse race. One of us had to win, one had to lose. What can I learn from that experience that meant that I could do it better next time? Or actually, how do I reflect appropriately to say, did I miss something? Why was their pitch better than mine? What have they got in their toolbox that I can't offer? Was it just my presentation, or is it actually my product that needs tweaking? So there's loads of ways you can take a step back, and almost that, talk about it in sport a little bit, but the ability to take a step back and see the bigger picture is huge. Like, I think when you're in something, it's all encompassing, and it's really difficult to do that. And that's a really powerful tool to say, like, actually, what is the bigger picture? And I think that's the art of coaching, actually, when you see it. Like, it's so easy to follow the ball on the pitch and sort of live it as a fan. But actually the art is to say, right, for me, there's 7 players on the pitch. One of them's got the ball, or the opposition have got the ball. Who's fatiguing? Who's getting tired? Who looks like they're struggling? What's my next move for substitutions? Like, what's the plan? And I think that bigger picture thing is massive. And I think it's probably even more important when you're on your own in business, because like you haven't got anyone to nudge you and say, hold on a minute, have you thought about this? You've got to see everything, but then you've got to be able to zoom in on the right things at the right time as well.
And I think there's so much gold in there, but I think it almost touches back to what we were talking about, of having the right support around you to help you. Like if you're in that space and you're still in that emotional space, of course emotions come up. We're humans. We do feel those emotions, and that's okay. But moving through that into what that perspective looks like is really valuable. From I guess kind of having that, I mean, you touched on it a little bit around the sort of the discipline, like having that personal discipline to not just keep going, but actually to ask those questions, to do the stuff when no one's seeing. How do you, I mean, during your playing days, like what would be your sort of, I don't want to call it a daily routine or something, but how do you get into that sort of daily motivation? Like, you're a dad, you've got a family, you've got the kids, you're doing drop off. How do you then go from that into effectively running you and getting into that sort of sporting mindset, or just that performance mindset? How do you flip between that? Because I know a lot of people struggle that. And obviously a lot of my listeners are females, they're juggling, they're mums, they're, very similar situation from a family perspective. We do the school drop off and then it's like, right, okay, business starts. And that transition can feel really hard. We go into procrastination, we do all the chores around the house and all that kind of stuff. How do you get into that space of discipline, the stuff that's intentional, the stuff that really makes a difference?
Yeah, it's a really good one. And like, I can definitely empathize with the mums out there doing the school run and having to switch to get into work. For me, it's planning, right? It's huge. And there's loads of examples where lack of planning can cause stress. And like, I think the best example I could give is if you're hungry and you go to the supermarket and you haven't planned what you're going to buy, and what you just sort of walk around aimlessly going, well, I fancy a bit of that, fancy a bit of that. And you come home and you're like, I still don't know what I'm going to cook, but I'm really hungry and I need to eat something quickly. So you make bad choices.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've planned ahead and going, right, this is my shopping list, these are my meals I'm going to cook this week, I'm going to go to shop. Not only are you more efficient in the supermarket because you're just getting the things you need, but when you get home, you're going, right, well, now I can cook straight away because I know exactly what I'm doing already. And if you flip that to the school drop off, if you just walk through the door and go, right, laptop on, let's go. Right, I've got a meeting in 5 minutes. Wow, how are you going to perform to your best? It's just impossible. Whereas the night before, you could have just jotted a few things down. Right, I've got a meeting tomorrow at just after drop off. These are my key points. This is what I want to get across. This is what I want to understand from who I'm speaking to. So when you walk through the door, you've probably got time for a coffee before you even have that meeting, and then go, right, well, I'm ready now because I feel confident in what I'm doing. And that's no different to sport, right? Like, yes, you're looking at mental and physical preparation for the session, but I needed to know what the session involved so that I could perform at my best. I wouldn't just run out to the pitch and go, right, what are we doing today? This will be fun. It will be fun because I love training, but I won't get the best out of it for me. Like, I could do a decent job, but it won't be the best I could be. Whereas actually, if I'm thinking about it when I'm doing my stretching and prehab and go, right, the session today is around defense, right? What do I want to work on individually that's going to then help me and the team be better? So that when I go out there, it's already in my head and I'm ready. So I think like planning is such a key tool. And I find it amazing actually with people in business that the use of like Outlook calendars, Google Calendar, whatever it is, to plan your day within your work time is huge, right? And you never miss a meeting because it's all in your diary. So the things that are missed are things like your good nutrition, your good food, your sleep, everything like that, which people think they can take for granted. But actually, you need to think about things in advance. Otherwise, you're just going to make poor decisions. Like, you need time to process things. Otherwise, you're just making like gut decisions all the time. And however good your gut feeling is, it's not going to be as good as if you've had time to think of A, B, and C.
Yeah. And do you know what keeps coming up to me when you're talking about that is that self-awareness. Like, what do you need as an individual? Because, you as part of a team, you're going to need, you personally will have needed different things to other people. Your pre-match setup would have been different. Your pre-training setup would have been different. You're all different, not just from a sort of mental perspective, but actually from a physical perspective. You're all different shapes and sizes. You need different things. You've all got different injuries or recovering or whatever. That self-awareness is so important to be able to set yourself up for success, whether that's on a daily basis, whether that's for a launch, whether that is whatever it is. But you talked about nutrition there, and I think it is really important. I think it's one of the biggest things that people miss, especially from a business perspective, is that they are, and maybe from a sport as well, really, is that they're so focused on the results that they want to create that reverse engineering backwards as to how you actually create those results. It's not about the sales. It's not about the clients. Of course it is, but actually to get those, it's all the stuff beforehand. The planning that you were talking about, it's looking after you as an individual. It's why my book's called Healthy You, Wealthy Business, right? You have to be in the optimal shape, mindset, physical wise, to be able to have that clarity of thought, to be able to plan properly, to be able to create those goals that you want to. How far in advance, like you used to do, I know from the sort of rugby sevens perspective, you'd have pretty much 3 weeks away for tournaments, 3 weeks at home in between for training and stuff. How far in advance would you start that sort of planning prep pre-season, as it were, before because I mean you played a lot sort of throughout the whole year, but actually the season wasn't the whole year. So how far in advance did you kind of plan for those tournaments, or even just for the season?
Yeah, so we're obviously in professional sport, you get a lot of planning done for you. It allows you to focus solely on what you're there to do, and that's to perform on the pitch. But that doesn't mean that you can't add planning to that. So when I say it's done for you, the things are like your season plan is given to you at the beginning. All the tournaments are laid out on there. Your training weeks are in there, what days you're in, what days are recovery days, all that. So it gives you a framework basically to work to, which is huge. And then you break that down, right? So you go, right, well, obviously I want to get selected for tournaments. Selection happens a week before we go, which generally, but it actually happens probably before that. If you're in a bad place or a good place, you can kind of gauge. There might be a few tight decisions like towards the end, but the coaches generally know where they're at with who they think is going to get selected. So it's about staying consistent throughout the season, but breaking down, when I was talking about planning around training and tournaments, it's, our training sessions would get, could just be coming out like the day before in terms of what we're doing, or we'd know a rough focus of the week of what the themes are and things like that. So you do have to be adaptable to it. But I think once you've got a process in place to plan, it's like you can do it a lot quicker. So for the first, if we stick on the food thing, because I love food. If you first time you do a meal plan, or you think about some food you want to cook, it takes you a little bit of a while to either find a recipe or to think about what ingredients you might need for that recipe. But once you've made that meal a few times, you don't need a recipe book. So you start to go, well, now I need this. I just need to check what the quantity is, but now I need this. So the more practice you get at it, the more efficient you become with it. And actually, it doesn't take very long to plan, and then you can start to tweak things as it becomes important. So obviously certain times of year will have a bigger pinch point. So if we use that like Olympic year as a really good example, we had World Series tournaments, we had 10 of them that season. Then we came together as England, Scotland and Wales for a 10-week training block before selection for the Olympics. So in that 10-week training block, we had 4 tournaments. So you've got, right, I know I need to be playing well on the World Series to have a chance of getting invited to the training squad for the Olympics. That Olympic training squad was 32 people going down to 12 players. So then you go, right, well, now I've made that. I know I need to then be in a good place during that, and who my competition is, and how many people are they likely to select in my position. So I need to be playing well and get selected for those training tournaments within that period. And then I need to make sure that I'm still performing. So what I said about the goals going from A to Z with a straight line. It's not about that. Like, it's picking the points which are important, but then making sure we're consistently performing. You can't always be world class at everything you do on the pitch. You're going to make mistakes, right? But it's how you react. So what you don't want is big dips in form. Like, you want to stay brimming at the top as much as possible.
We don't want the roller coaster.
Yeah, and then peaking at the right times as well. So when you're training, you go through periods of deload, you go through periods of like stress on the body to really like push your limits to get better, that growth mindset. And then when you have the deload, and then you peak back up for the tournament. So there is little dips in there throughout the way, and it's just understanding where you can get your rest and recovery to make sure that you're refocused and ready to go each time. So those 3 weeks away are really intense. Then you come back, you have a week off, recovery, and then you start to get back into training. You start to build back up for the next set of tournaments. So it's just that understanding on what the priority and pinch points are when you're planning, and sort of go, well, I mean, I like to use the example, if you, well, we looked a lot about switching on and switching off throughout the day and tournament time and throughout the week and everything. And I think this is something, well, mental well-being is huge, right? It's such a big part of sport and business life. If you don't switch off in the day, you're just going to burn yourself out. So the amount, and this has probably been one of the challenges of the virtual world now, is that people go back to back on meetings all the time. Yeah. They don't give themselves even 5 minutes to walk away from their laptop and go into a different room and then come back fully refocused. Because imagine in the old days, pre-COVID, where like you wouldn't just sit in a meeting room all day, having people come in and out, and you be the one that doesn't move. That you might move to a different office, a different meeting room, someone else's office, pop back to your desk, go make a cup of tea. All those little breaks in your day allowed your brain just to switch off and refocus for when you start again. And that's the big challenge with virtual calls, is that they overrun slightly and you go, I've got a straight back, I'm letting that person. No one's going to hold you back if you just, right, I've got to go. I need 5 minutes before my next meeting. If we need to do more, we catch up another time. That's like, I think we have to be stricter with what we do as individuals to actually make our performance levels get better.
Yeah,
it's too easy just to roll one into the other and not take those breaks, because you're there sat down, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think that's one of the things that people find, not just within your industry as well, but the ability to switch off, the ability to decompress when there's always something to do. There's always something that you can do to train better, train harder, perform better, learn more, watch something else, read something else. There's always something that we can do to enhance our learning, to do more analysis, whatever that looks like. What do you do to switch off?
Right.
Other than the kind of the practical things of making breaks and having personal boundaries and the meeting side of things, what do you enjoy doing outside of rugby, outside of the kind of your job, I guess?
Yeah, so I'll say coined a term, but I use the term my time.
Yeah.
And for me, that's my break from the norm. Now, the norm is my day-to-day work, my family life. Like, my time needs to be just me, away from that. Now, that could be exercise, could be going for a walk, could be listening to a podcast. It's something that separates me from what I'm doing day to day, to give myself time to be the best I can be, to refocus, refresh, realign myself with what I want to do. Now, it can look a bit selfish at times to say, right, no, I need to go and do this. But well, Amy will tell you, if I'm
this is your wife.
If I don't have this, then I can be grumpy about it, and then I'm not being the best to her or the kids or anything. So actually giving each other that space to do something on their own benefits everybody.
Yeah.
So the golden gem I had when I was playing is, and it's all linked around like the mental side of things and mental well-being, is we had a sports psychologist who was involved with the team for quite a few years building up to Rio. And on my first meeting with her, she said to me, like, how much do you train your brain compared to how much you train your body? And I was like embarrassed, because obviously it was 0 at that time. Like, obviously I thought about it a little bit, but I didn't really know how the brain works and how powerful it can be in the right and the wrong way.
Mm.
And obviously in sport, we were doing like 4 rugby sessions a week, skill sessions, 4 weight sessions a week, fitness, all sorts of things. But she just said, like, it doesn't matter how fit you are, how strong you are. If you can't perform under pressure because you don't know how to manage your brain, you might as well go home, because you're just being consistent. And that's when we led to understand about switching on and switching off. And, you know, the sevens tournaments are 3 matches in a day, 6 matches over a weekend. And if you're switched on from 7 a.m. when you wake up because you're ready for the game, till the last game might not be till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then you're not going to bed till midnight, 1 o'clock. Like, I guarantee by the 6th game, your performances aren't going to be that great.
Yeah. And you were sharing rooms with people as well, right? So it wasn't even like you could just retreat to literally your own space.
No, so it's just understanding what switching off means. And for me, it's switching off from the task you're doing at the moment. So that can be as simple as going to make a cup of tea, just walking away from your laptop in your office, your spare room, wherever it may be in the actual office, just going for a walk, like 2-3 minutes, going away from your desk, change of environment, change of setting, change of mindset. And then you come back and you go, well, right, I'm ready. What's the next task? Yeah. And just that little ability to switch off and then switch back on means that your little dips go back up, your dips go back up, and throughout the day, obviously, your energy levels and performance and productivity stays high. There's not sort of huge science to it, but it's just your ability to refresh the mind. And I think probably linked to that, the most underrated part of physical well-being is sleep. And people always say, like, I just don't need 8 hours of sleep a night. And you go, well, okay, right, I understand you can get through the week with less than 8 hours, but how good are you at the weekend when it's your chance to recover and spend time with the family? Like, how good are you at that? Oh no, I'm really tired because I've had a busy week at work. Yeah, you've had a busy week, but if you'd have allowed yourself time to sleep and recover properly, actually, when it's your time to do stuff that you want to do, you've still got some energy. And like, it's mad to think that our body doesn't need to recover, right? It uses however many calories when you're sleeping. Like, that's the body recovering. So if you don't give it a chance to recover, how can you expect to be good at what you're doing and over a long period of time? Yes, you might have the odd time where you have to work at a depleted level, but you can't just catch up all the time, because otherwise you miss out on the fun stuff, right? The stuff, like, you end up just working and being so fully encompassed in that. Why do you work? What motivates you to work? Is it because you want to just work, or is it because you want to do things and provide experiences for other people, like in your family or yourself? And I guarantee it's the latter for most people.
Yeah. And I think especially when you have that choice, and, you know, as business owners, we're in that really fortunate position that we get to choose. Like, you literally get to choose how you run your day, how you run your week. And sometimes that feels quite high pressure that you should be on. That was, for me, it was the biggest learning and the hardest learning, transitioning from a corporate career of fixed time to then running my own business, of being, do you know what? I don't have to sit at a desk from 9 till 5. I don't have to do this. I get to choose. And that was one of the reasons that I left the corporate world, was I didn't want to be tied down to that. I wanted that flexibility, that freedom to choose. And I think it's almost stepping into that, being the CEO of your life. Like, how does that work? Like, what gets you to that high performance piece? This isn't about everyone trying to be an Olympic athlete here. This is about, what do you need as an individual to perform at your best? Because that's when your business is going to perform at your best. That's when you're going to perform at your best within your families. And one question I have got for you around that, though, is this feeling of guilt, because you were obviously away a lot and traveling a lot when you were playing rugby, and then to come back into that family situation, that family life, to still need your own time when your kids haven't seen you, your wife hasn't seen you, your family hasn't seen you, your friends haven't seen you. How do you still create that and juggle that feeling of guilt, which I know is something that comes up a lot when I have conversations with people?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough, like, traveling and being away from the family, and I had to learn how to do that, because obviously the family came during my career. So
yes, I mean, you started playing, you know, from school. We haven't really touched on your career path. We'll do that in a minute.
When I was starting, it was just me and Amy, and like, she had her life when I was away, and I was obviously traveling, doing something I absolutely loved, and then the kids came along, and it's that adaptability to understand like what's important. And I think with everything here, for me, it's linked about like what motivates you, like what is your driver to do what you're doing, like your why are you doing it? And for me, that did change over time, and it changed quite significantly, but it was always based around my family and making them proud. And whether that was mum and dad or you or Amy, or when the kids came along, it was a greater thing then. And actually that tweaked slightly. It was like, well, that was a massive driver for me once they came along, to say, well, can I still be playing for my country when they're old enough to understand and come and watch me?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Like, to keep pushing yourself to do the little things, like to have my eldest there on my last tournament, like, it was incredible. Like, to bring them into the changing room. So all those experiences that, they wouldn't have got if I had stopped earlier. And that's massive. And like, now I finished playing and went into coaching, and what I'm doing now, they still drive me to be the best I can be. Like, that is my deeper purpose, is to make them proud with what I'm doing. And I think having a really strong why is massive, because when you're feeling a bit down, you go, well, hold on a minute, this isn't about me. I'm doing this for someone else or for other people. And the same with that guilt thing. Yeah, I've been away, but why have I been away? It's for a reason. Now, if I want to be really good with them when I come back, I've still got to make sure I have a little bit of space for me. Now, the argument is, yeah, you've had that for 3 weeks, but it's not, because you're away and you're doing something with such energy and purpose for that reason, as I just talked about. When you come back, yes, they're desperate to see you, and you're desperate to see them. And that could be your partner or anyone really, or friends. But there's also the opportunity within your days when they're like, to have some separation still, so that your energy is renewed all the time. Because you have to remember, and it goes back to the perspective thing. You've just done something really high octane, high energy when you're away with business or sport, whatever it is. Coming back, they're bringing all the energy. So you've got to live off that for a little bit. And then when you get your moment to say, right now, I'd like to do this, or I'm going to do this so that we can do this later on. And like, if I, with the kids, if I use the example of playing football in the garden, if I'm absolutely shattered, I'm not going to be much fun for them in the garden. So then they have a really negative experience.
Yeah.
If I can renew my energies in my way, I know that when I go and play football with them, that they're going to have to work really hard to beat me.
I love that. The inner competitiveness. I think it's always there though, but I think it is that values piece. It's that why piece. We grew up where there's only 18 months between us, right? And we were competitive as growing up, and our children are growing up competitive with each other. And I love to see that. But I think it's that nurture piece around, why are you competitive? Like, let's make sure the competitiveness happens in the right space, and you being there as a parent and seeing that as well, helping them be competitive at the right times as well. Like, this isn't about, being competitive about how quickly you can eat, for example. This is about actually channeling that competitiveness in the right way. One question that I had that kind of links to this a little bit, is something that one of my listeners asked me to ask you, actually, was this idea around nurture versus nature, and also that talent versus luck piece. Because you talked about your why there initially, before children were around, before you had a family. The Olympics didn't exist for rugby sevens when you first started out. So what was the bigger goal here that kept you going, that why? And how did that kind of come from, that sort of nature nurture, luck versus talent piece? Because obviously you're very talented. You wouldn't get to where you are without some level of talent, but it doesn't come without all the hard work that we've spoken at length about.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to this. The nature nurture side of things, like, I wasn't great at rugby growing up. Like, I loved rugby. I loved all sports, and I still
Yeah.
do. Um, did I have an ability when we were younger that I was going to play for England and finish with the records that I hold? No, no, of course I didn't. So, but did I have a skill set that could be molded in a way? Like, I don't know that back then. You'll have to ask
Yeah.
people who coached me. What I do know, and what I'm trying to encourage with my family, is that giving them lots of different skill sets, whether it's sport or off field, will help them be better all-rounded people. Like, I didn't think I never once did I plan to be a professional rugby player.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think that now. Like, I went to university doing a business degree like you, and even at that point, I didn't think, it was never even on my radar.
Well, you didn't get selected for the university team initially, right?
I didn't get picked for the freshers team. I nearly quit rugby, and it's like, well, back then, why did I play rugby? Pure enjoyment. I loved the game. I loved running around. I loved being part of a team, and I loved the values that associated with a team sport. Why did I nearly quit? Because I didn't get to be doing the things. I wasn't having as much enjoyment because I wasn't playing. I was training, and I love training. I still do, but I wasn't getting the full enjoyment because I wasn't getting to play any matches. So it was at that point, it was find another way to do that. And obviously Dad was very supportive with this, and probably got a lot to thank him for with that. But convincing me to go and try a different rugby setting to get that enjoyment back, and it did. And I think that goes back to surrounding yourself with the right people, and actually, if something doesn't succeed, first off, there are other ways to do things. You don't have to just persist with the same way all the time. And my route into professional rugby was very different to a lot of people's. Like, semi-pro rugby at Moseley, where I was coaching in primary schools and secondary schools gymnastics. Like, that's not conducive to an international rugby player, but it taught me loads of things around developing people, understanding people, different settings, different cultures within school and settings and things. So, all of those things have framed me to where I am today. Now, as I said, the why changed as it evolved. And I remember the first time I pulled an England shirt on with like England universities, and it was,
it's a special feeling, right?
It was incredible, right? It's something, though, after the setbacks that I'd had by not getting selected or being in the B team at school, one of the big things that I took forward through my whole career was just take nothing for granted. Like, you earn the opportunity by working hard. You don't earn it because you're in the right place at the right time. You've got to have some talent behind it, but you've also got to have a mindset that wants you to keep getting better and better. And like, hard work does prevail in the end. Like, who would you prefer to have in a team? Someone who's an absolute maverick who can't be trusted with their decisions, or someone who's going to steadily improve and get better and better and better because they want to get better and their inner drive is there? Yes, you want the maverick for a short period who might win a game for you, but you need to have a certain number of players or people that will consistently perform and get better. And that's probably the bracket I put myself in. Like, I was never going to light up the world with what I did. It was how I felt. But I knew there were certain things within the game of rugby, and sevens especially, that I could do better than anyone else in the world. But I kept practicing them. It wasn't something that I thought, well, I'm all right at that, so I'm going to do all the other things now. I'm going to try and do the things that get you noticed as like a flair player. They weren't important to me. It was actually making my strengths real super strengths and making them something that made it hard not to pick me. And that's kind of how my career and journey grew, really. And then with that understanding of the game, and the longer you're in it, the more experience you get, and you start to understand how the games develop, and you see it. And that's why I ended up in coaching, I guess, because I had that eye for the detail around how the game's been played and how different players are performing and things like that. So I've digressed a little bit there, I think.
No, but I think it is important to think that actually, when we think about whatever sport it is, when we think about an Olympic athlete, everyone assumes that the medal is the end goal. Whereas actually, and I talk a lot about this from a business perspective, passion, performance, profits, passion, performance, results. Like, you have to have that passion, you have to have that love, because when those curveballs come up, when those setbacks come up, if you don't love it, you're going to quit. If you don't want to find a different way around it, then you're going to end that. And that's okay if you don't love it enough. But I think when you've got that such strong reason for doing it inside you, you find a way to make it happen. And I think then when you start building on that around the performance piece, and, I remember both of us, like when the weather's rubbish, like we both played winter sports, like outdoor temperatures are not conducive. They're not fun to go for runs or anything. London marathons, just, that's kind of a topical thing right now as we're recording this. People have to train for that during the winter months. There's a reason that people do that. And I think it goes back to what we talked about before around the behind the scenes stuff, the having that motivation, having that drive, but that comes from your why. It comes from the passion for what you're doing. The sport evolved a lot as you were playing. And I think there was that sort of wave of sort of growth as the sport grew, that you were, I don't want to say in the right place at the right time, but there was an element of that the Olympics came through at a time that you were at your kind of performance level as well, which kind of allowed you to tweak that why, maybe?
Yeah, well, no, I don't think the why changed. I think the Olympics came, it was announced an Olympic sport in 2010, I think it was, 2011.
Yeah.
I still 6 years to the Olympics. And
yeah.
Sevens is obviously very attritional. It didn't change my why, it changed my goals.
Yeah.
It gave me, and that's very different. Like your whys, you're in a drive, you're in a motivation, and your goal is your dream, what you want to try and achieve.
Yeah.
If at the end of that journey I didn't make the Olympics, then would I have still enjoyed the journey? Of course I would. And I went with that mindset to the Olympics. And you talked about the medal not being the goal, and it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Like, the medal was the icing on the cake, right? And I went to the Olympic. The context of it is we had 10 weeks training together, of which I missed the first 2 because I was recovering.
Because you were still recovering from this injury, yeah.
And I missed the first tournament out of those 4 I talked about. So I was like up against it to go. The team that went to the Olympics had never played a match together, never played a tournament together. So how could we expect to do well?
Yeah.
Did we have the belief we could do well? Of course we did. We wanted to win gold. That wasn't that's what our drive day to day was, to have a gold medal mindset. Like, everything we did was to try and win gold. But I had to be realistic that we'd never played together before.
Yeah.
We could lose every single game. How would I get enjoyment from the Olympics as someone who'd watched pretty much every moment of every Olympics growing up? To get the chance.
What inspired me most about sport as we were growing up was seeing athletes on the TV, right?
Exactly right. And even to this day, like, I love watching sport. So to go to an Olympics and focus solely on the rugby would have been really stupid for me. And I don't think it would have given me or put me in the best mindset to perform. And I learned that the hard way, actually, at the Glasgow Commonwealths. So 2014, 2 years before, I was so desperate to win a Commonwealth medal. That's all everything I did was focused on that. And I got it wrong. And I made a massive error in the quarterfinal against Samoa, got yellow carded, and we lost 12-10. They scored a try while I was off the pitch. And from then on, I was like, this isn't about the rugby, it's the journey. Like, I've now got a really bad experience of the whole Commonwealth Games because I mucked up at a pressure moment because all I could focus on was trying to win a medal.
Yeah.
So I went to the Olympics with the mindset, actually, the rugby's the rugby. I've worked so hard for so many years. I'll be good at that. That's not an issue. How do I make sure that, regardless of the outcome, that I've had the most amazing Olympic experience that I could ever imagine? And that started from the moment I got selected, to make sure that every opportunity I got was to see and speak to as many different athletes as possible. And these are athletes that I've like watched on telly, and we've watched on telly and gone, oh my God, they're amazing. I was
Heroes of ours, right? We were just having
I,
this conversation beforehand.
yeah, I was suddenly in an environment with them, in the same kit as them, in the same team as them. Like, I'm going to take this opportunity to have a conversation. And, having conversations with Andy Murray in the laundry queue, or Jess Ennis-Hill, like after she'd just won her silver medal, and like sort of cherishing moments that we'd both just won Olympic medals. Like, these are like Justin Rose, like I'm obviously a massive golf fan, but, sharing a gym with him, having conversations with him, every single moment was there. And I'm talking about these people because I still like put them on pedestals because they're amazing athletes. And I don't always see myself as getting to that point. But when I reflect now, like that journey's there, that can't be taken away from me. Now, having the silver medal is just the sort of product of all of that hard work and the journey that went with it. If I had not come back with a silver medal, would I be regretting things? No, of course not, because I literally took every moment and opportunity as I wanted to. And as I said, all that hard work then paid off, and it's a team sport. And we go back to that 2-horse race. Someone has to win, someone has to lose. That's the same with every single match on that journey. So yeah, it was, yes, of course, everyone wants to win the best medal, the best outcome in any situation, but it might not happen. So you've got to make sure that you do things as you want to do and you're happy with that journey. And I certainly was to the Olympics, and it's something that I tried to pass on when we went to Tokyo. Obviously,
yes, because you shifted into coaching for the last Olympics.
So
how was that experience of just being on literally the other side, and not just from you were coaching, involved in the coaching the men and the women, right? So again, it was a different shift from being at Olympics, but not as a player, and a totally different role.
Yeah, so I was sort of 90% with the women. I was there with match day with them, and then I was doing a bit of remote coaching with the men during their tournament, because the men's tournaments was the 3 days before the women's. So I was doing a little bit of video coaching with them during their tournament and helping them out. But being on the other side as a coach is, the Olympics is crazy, right? Because you are suddenly staying in an environment which is probably the least high performance you could ever imagine.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the, I think it was actually Delhi, the Commonwealth Games, wasn't it? It was the most extreme example, so slightly different to Olympics.
Well, it's not though. Like, the Commonwealth is just a slightly smaller version of the Olympics, less teams, less athletes in the village, but ultimately it's a multi-sport games, which is not set up for performance. So if we go to Rio, though, there's 10,000 athletes staying in a little village, like tower blocks with tiny bedrooms where my headboard and footboard of the bed were touching walls. Like, there was 2 of us in a room which had basically the space for 3 single beds in, and that was it.
And you're a tall guy, right? So it's not like the beds are made for that either.
And then you go, right, we're going to the food hall. It's open 24 hours a day. You can eat whatever you want, from healthy options to pizza to McDonald's. Like, you've got to be so disciplined with what you're doing. But then you add on like the extra physical exertion, just walking to and from the dining hall every day. The number of steps we were doing was 2-3 times more than I would do at home, just even if I didn't train that day.
Yeah.
There's so many parts to it that aren't there for performance, but it's the only way you can get it going. Only way you can get that many people in one place, and it works. But ultimately, the people that can focus on their process and what their little steps are will perform better. The distractions are unbelievable. The enormous amount of distractions, from like the chill out rooms, the games room, the media, the excitement, all the messages you're getting from home because people realize you're in Olympic Games. Like, it's phenomenal. So how do you then channel that energy to perform better? And that's what I tried to sort of pass on with my experiences from Rio to the girls for Tokyo.
Before we touch into that, 2 things that come up for me there is, it's not just about the final destination, it's about enjoying that journey. But as part of that journey has to be your own. Like, you've got to stay in your lane, you've got to stay focused, because those are the bits that are going to make the little differences, which might sound trivial, like the extra 2,000-3,000 steps a day. might sound trivial to some people, but actually when you're doing that every single day in the run up to a high performance space, that has a huge impact. So just, yeah, I think enjoying the journey and also the kind of remaining focused on the task in hand is also really key.
It has to be your own journey, right? You can't copy someone else's, because it's the same with everything, like exercise, nutrition, diet plans, whatever it is, your business plan. It's got to be yours. You can't just take a blueprint from someone else and say, well, that'll work for me because it worked for you. Like it doesn't, life doesn't work like that. You've got to find something that works for you and navigate it that suits you. Now, you know, we talked about it earlier with family life and getting the work-life balance. Like your life's going to be very different to someone who doesn't have kids, because they don't have that school drop off. So if they want, they can start work an hour earlier and finish an hour earlier, or they could exercise in the morning, whereas you're doing breakfast and teeth cleaning and getting them dressed ready for school. And you've got to understand that part of your day is there, that you can't change that. So how do you make sure that your other bits fit into that effectively? And I think that's your journey has to be your own. And, you know, we talked about switching on and switching off earlier. Like when the kids came along and I was still playing, like there's no better way to switch off from sport than come home and have a cuddle with a newborn baby. Like you're suddenly,
it's so different.
It doesn't matter what your day, how good or bad your day was. Like all your mind is just on this little human being. So there's positives and negatives to it, but it has to fit your journey, and that's the key to all this.
Yeah. And so then talking about that transition from being a player into a coach, or whatever career change that looks like, because, you know, a lot of people come from corporate to set their own businesses up, or, you know, like me, I've set up 3 different businesses and that journey has evolved over time and I've wanted to do different things. From moving from that space where you're in control of a certain amount of things to then being in control, or not in control of, but managing other people, coaching other people, holding space for other people, is very, very different. How have you been able to transition that through into being able to support other people?
Yeah, I think probably one of the toughest years I had was the player coach year, when I was still trying to perform at international level, but also learn the traits and arts of coaching. And that was really challenging. And I talked about this with loads of people around, very similar to a business environment in a corporate world, or where you're in a team and you get promoted and suddenly you're managing them. Like suddenly you're managing your mates, and there's no easy way to look at this going, well, you know, they know me in a different light. Now I'm their boss. I think I know them as a mate and what they like. Now, that my big take and learning from that year was I didn't know them well enough to help them get better. And
because you'd been in your own personal journey.
Well, 100%, but also, you know, what you see from an outside of someone is very different to what's driving them inside.
Yeah.
Not many people are very good at sharing or showing those traits to you. So I realized very quickly that I had to, and I used the term learn the learners. And I learned that quickly that year, that I just didn't know these guys well enough to coach them. Like what's their motivation? What drives them? Where do they want to be in the end of the season, 6 months next year? Like what areas do they really want to work on, or where do they see their strengths and weaknesses? I just didn't know these. I just saw them as teammates and mates, like, and I had a lot of fun on and off the pitch with them. But now I was in a different role and I had to learn something really quickly. So when I transitioned into coaching the women, that actually became even more important for me, to spend time building relationships and understanding them as people, understanding what their level of knowledge is quickly, so that I can then help them grow even quicker. And that's probably my biggest takeaway from the transition, is like actually the relationships between people are so important to breed a successful culture and business. And whether you're talking about sport or business, it is business at the end of the day. Like you're managing, like head coaching the women, I'm managing a team of staff and players, internal, external stakeholders. There's no difference to managing a business there. Like, yes, it's a different office, but ultimately the decisions are very similar. The strategy is very similar. The only difference is it's like it is the pinnacle of that environment. So you've got to make sure that everyone is on the same page and buying into that same thing. That doesn't change though at lower levels. You still need people to buy into the same vision, but the teams might be slightly smaller, or it might be a bit more set in an office environment. You might not have as much transition or you don't have the selection criteria going in.
Yeah.
All those added things that can derail people. So I've learned loads from the transition into coaching, and I loved coaching the women. I found them incredibly diligent with what they did. Their want to know why we were doing something was brilliant, because it challenged you as a person to know the detail really well. They just want to be better, right? The gratitude they had when you helped them improve or learn something new was amazing. And they're just a very fun group to work with, but knew how to work hard. And I think that's something where I talked about right at the beginning about getting the right people in your environment, in your culture, who want to be better all the time, will help a business grow and succeed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've been talking for ages and we could carry on talking probably for the rest of the day. There's two more things that I want to kind of sense check in with you before we close. So obviously you've been in this, and I don't want this to be a kind of a gender comparison piece, but what I find really fascinating about men who have achieved success and women who have achieved success, there are differences in a mindset, and there are different feelings that kind of come up, whether it's around guilt, whether it's around more wobbles or less confidence and that kind of thing. I'd love your take on this, because you've been at elite level in exactly the same sport for men and women and seeing it from both sides. And as I said, I don't want to get into a kind of a comparison too much. This isn't what it's about, but I would love to, because most of my listeners are women. What I really want to pull out of this is almost the kind of the watch outs. Like if women are listening to this and thinking, okay, well, maybe there's a confidence dip. Like, how do you get through that? What have you noticed from a sort of a habits perspective, let's call it that, rather than a mindset perspective, that has been different from men versus women?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I found was the emotional side of working with women. And I don't mean this in any way derogatory way. I think men bottle up their emotions and they come out in a very different way, usually hidden from anyone else, or frustrations come out in training and that side of it. Working with women, it's just evident all the time, their emotional connection with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that should actually be cherished, and
it's really powerful.
It's so powerful. Like, and that's when I talked about the empathy side of things. Like that doesn't happen in the men's game. It's so cutthroat and almost like a harsh environment to be in, a harsh environment to breed success. Whereas in the women's environment, the empathy side, like they care so much about each other. So it's so powerful that the one bit that I challenged them to keep pushing each other on was to be competitive with each other. And I think that's something that I've noticed women will always, not always, sorry, that's probably harsh, but shy away from a little bit. Whereas the men's team, it was like, competition. I'm going to beat you. I don't, even if I'm not as good as you, I'm going to beat you. Whereas in rugby, the amount of times someone would make a tackle in training and say sorry afterwards. So I had to ban the word sorry in training to me and the girls, like purely because like I want for them to get better, they've got to push each other.
Yeah.
Otherwise it just becomes a nice environment. So we had a really empathetic culture and environment, and it was more apparent off the pitch. But on the pitch, when we crossed the line, we needed it to be, this is rugby. We are preparing for battle, for matches, and how much can we push each other? Now, yes, we still need to be conscious of how we interact and speak with each other, knowing that it could lead to an emotional response. But if they knew the intent and the reason behind it was the right intent,
yeah,
it becomes a lot easier to understand. So I think yes, there's a massive difference in the emotional side of things with women, both in sport and business. But if you can channel that for the right way, I think is really powerful. And just understand it's there, right? Like, it's not a bad thing to be emotional. I think growing up, we probably didn't talk about our emotions enough, and I think that's changing a little bit now in the world. Like, and it's, you know, the more you can understand your emotions, the more you can manage them and deal with them in the right circumstances. So, yeah, there was definitely when I started with them a sorry culture, which I think almost limits you to push yourself.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's sort of trying to be more unapologetic, not just for who you are, but actually the success you want to achieve. I think you're right. I think there's definitely, and it's partly a British thing, it's definitely a female thing, but I think almost that sort of reason for wanting to succeed. Sometimes people feel like they need to apologize for wanting to be successful, wanting to do something different. And in sport, that's almost allowed. Like, of course you want to be successful, you want to play at the highest level, you want to win matches, that's okay, that's why you do it. But when it comes to business, there's almost this sort of, well, if I tell people how successful I am, they're going to judge me. If I tell people that I've won some new clients or I've got this level of income, then people are going to judge me. Like, how do they? And to me, there's no real difference. Like, it's your playing field. And, you know, there's a nice little analogy throwing in there, but I think it is your playing field. And if we can create that level playing field, whether it's men, whether it's women, but also that, I mean, it goes back to everything we've been talking about, this sort of your passion for what you're doing, your why for what you're doing, and actually not being apologetic for wanting success in that will drive you. It'll help you stay intentional, it'll help you stay focused.
Yeah, so I think there's a bit there between arrogance and confidence.
Yeah.
Isn't there? So, like, it could be easy to get caught up with oversharing everything
you're
doing that's well, because you feel like you've got to prove yourself all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you don't get that with the male environment. You just, you know, this is me. I've got this. I'm not bravado, but, you know, I've got this. This is me. You're going to see it. You're going to see me playing this way. I don't need to say how good I am at this or that, because I'm not. And don't get me wrong, I know how challenging women's sport is in terms of them fighting for everything just to be able to play the game, right? So there is almost a desire to keep showing that. Whereas I think, yeah, you shouldn't be apologetic for performing at your best. And I think that's the slight difference between being arrogant and confident with what you can. So, I mean, that's something. I mean, women in sport are still lacking in confidence to showcase how good they are.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you need to shout about it, but it's almost the analogy I would use would be, do you talking on the pitch?
Yeah, the results speak for themselves, right?
Yeah, and performances, right? So, you know, if you go out and perform at your best, people will take notice. If you talk up a good game and then don't perform, or people are waiting for you to slip because you give it the big talk up.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the slight sort of difference, isn't there, between that? So, but yeah, it's really interesting. I mean,
there's probably a whole separate podcast we could do around that.
It's right, because like personality differences, like where does it come from? I mean, that's something that's definitely nurtured, in my opinion. Like, from a young age, still in this country, people are stereotyping boys and girls with colours and what they're playing with, everything. So those personalities are formed way before the child has a chance to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even just literally our situation of, you know, there were just the two of us, but then cousins, all male cousins. I was the only girl within, 5 of us. And that totally shaped who I was and the games that we played, the sports that we went on did, but also the differences and recognizing that as well. And I don't necessarily kind of want to go into that so much now, but I think it's there is that piece of nurture as well, as we, you know, kind of looping back into that sort of nature versus nurture. But I think actually whatever has happened, whatever background you've had, is going to shape you. It's what you do with that allows you to then create the results that you do. You know, we hear the rags to riches stories all the time, but I think we also recognize that actually people who are privileged, you know, people who do get that amazing setup through childhood, there's still a lot of those that don't go on and succeed. So it's not like it's a kind of a golden ticket or whatever that might be. And I think it's you have to have that passion. It's sort of, in some ways, this is a bit of a summary of what we've been talking about. You have to have that passion. You've got to have that drive that comes from somewhere. But actually, it's what you do with that then allows you to kind of move through.
Yeah, I was always interested with the girls coming through into the England setup and what their background was, because I think if we look at you, for example,
this isn't supposed to be turning it back on me. But we can do. I'm interested to hear this.
Obviously, three cousins and me, and you growing up, you had to be competitive. You had to fight for things to if you wanted to play any sports with us outside, you had to step up a little bit, because otherwise,
when there's 5 of you, there's always one that's left on the side, right? When it's a 4-player.
Right. So, but what I'd look back at, and the links between how similar that was to a lot of the women's players growing up, like a lot of them had older brothers, or they played in teams and just boys and them, so they had to fight for everything. And does that breed that competitiveness that allowed you to then go and play lacrosse for England, or does it allow that? Does it awaken something within your brain that gives you?
Yeah. And I think when someone told me I wasn't good enough, my PE teacher told me that I wasn't ever good enough to play for England. And I'm like, okay, let's go.
So sometimes, that it wakens up like part of the brain that has that. I mean, it can have obviously a negative side to it if it's not channeled in the right way, and lead to different routes. But I was just always fascinated how they got into rugby, the girls, and what gave them that competitive nature, because like playing rugby is very different to what the stereotypical young girl growing up at the moment is doing. And it's just always interested. I mean, the psychology side of things is amazing from a child point of view, and
it's a huge one, isn't it? What's been your highlight of your career to date? let's add the to date in, because even though you're not playing, you've kind of transitioned from that now, but what's the highlight of your career to date?
I mean, I don't really like to look at it as a highlight, because I like to just think of all the memories that I've taken from my journey. So I don't think I can give you one specific highlight, like top.
In some ways, I love that you can't, because it goes back to everything that we've spoken about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, so some definite like big memories for me are like Dad presenting my 50th jersey in Hong Kong. As you know, that was a surprise moment, and that was pretty special. Obviously, the Olympic journey was amazing. But and then so, I mean, I'm probably giving you top 3 here, but like, no, I can't give you top 3. Head coaching the women at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, where I went to university and lived for a decent part of my life, like to go back there and sort of lead a team into
that's a full circle moment, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. But the full circle bit is actually reminding myself of that phone call when I got my first England call up for the Sevens, and that to me feels like yesterday still. And like, there's so many memories I've got associated with playing and coaching that I don't want to give you a one. There are probably lots of memories that I've got which mean more to me than they do to anyone else anyway. So it's I always find that question really difficult, because it's ultimately they're my memories. I don't need to share them. Like,
and they mean something to you, and they're not going to mean other things. And I think, but I think that's really important as well. That, I mean, honestly, it goes back to literally everything we've been talking about. Like, it's a personal journey. The personal journey to success is completely unique. Your version of success is going to be unique. And it isn't about that gold medal. It isn't about being that elite athlete. It's about enjoying the journey. It's about creating those memories, creating the different experiences that you have done, whether that's sport, whether that's business. And, you know, obviously I've seen kind of the other side of your journey as well, and kind of lived and breathed that with you through right from the early days, from literally from school days. And it's been amazing to see you get to the levels and achieve the accolades that you have done, and see your name in the Guinness World Record book. And, you know, and it's something to be hugely proud of, which I am. But I think also there's a human behind this. And, you know, at the end of the day, you are my brother. And I know we have kind of really down to day, like basic conversations, that when it comes to this perception of an athlete, you are actually just a normal human being. And I think that's also really important, that it's your personal journey. And however much people see you on TV, or, you know, you sing your heroes at the Olympic Games, they are normal people, and they're going about their daily lives to achieve their best version of themselves. And I think there's something huge that we can all take from that, that this is about your personal journey. This is about your personal version of success. And it's going to be different for all of us.
100%. And I think you take your successes from you, not like my rugby career. What I did on the pitch doesn't define me. Like, who I am as a person defines me. And I think that's what I'll always look back to. Other people will look at it going, oh, this was amazing, this was amazing. And I'll be like, yeah, that's just me. Like, I'm not, and it goes back to that arrogance versus confidence piece, isn't it? Like, I was confident in my ability of what I could do on the pitch, but I'm not someone who shouts about it all the time. Like, I think if you walk past me in the street, maybe not you, other people, that they wouldn't necessarily think, oh, well, they definitely wouldn't, that I'd been to an Olympics both as a player and a coach, and I'd done all the things, I'd competed in all the events that and medaled at all the events that I tried at. So I think it's a huge bit. And I think that's, if anyone can take anything from this, your success is built on you, no one else. Like, and if you want the success, you define what that success looks like, and you navigate the journey and create the path that won't be easy or straight lines, but you create that path to the success that you want. And I think as soon as you start to compare yourself to other people and what they're doing, of course you're going to have a negative experience, because all the time people are doing different things to you. And the power of social media is cruel in as many ways as it is good, because all you're doing is watching other people's successes, but that's their success that they're being overconfident about or arrogant. Whereas actually the best memories and success from your journey are the ones that you've got in your head. Yeah.
I feel like that's a really lovely way to end the conversation, even though I can chat to you about this for a huge amount of time. I would actually, if you're listening to this, I would love for you to leave us some feedback, because, and what your kind of biggest golden takeaways are, your nuggets are from this, because for me, there's been so many, and I know you really, really well. And I think there's just relating that sport back to business, relating the journey, the success. There's so many things in there. Please do leave us a piece of feedback on this and let us know your biggest takeaways, and share this as well, because I think there's so much value in this conversation that will support people, whether they're in that sporting journey, whether they're in that business journey, wherever they are in that journey. And coupled to that then, James, where can people connect with you if they wanted to find out a little bit more about you?
I guess social media is the easiest way, but obviously stepping away from England at Christmas, I've spent a bit of time just repurposing myself and what I want to do, and figuring out what the next steps are. And I think for me, I've done a little bit of work at our old school, and doing a little bit of consultancy with Japan Rugby, which has been amazing. But yeah, if anyone's wants more information about my journey, then obviously they can go through you or contact me directly. Like I'm pretty relaxed and easy to talk to.
LinkedIn's probably the best place to find you, isn't it? James Rodwell on LinkedIn.
Probably the best place. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, I've loved our conversation. Looking forward to catching up with you outside of work very soon. But yeah, I hope you have enjoyed listening to the Healthy Business Podcast episode today. I will be back next week with a solo episode. But please do leave us some feedback for this one, your golden takeaways, and share it far and wide, because I think this conversation, as I said, is super valuable for wherever you're at within your journey.